Dad only needs our guest room for 3 nights.
No, I don't want him staying here.
He helped us when we had nothing.
Absolutely not. Figure it out.
Okay, I will.
The night my husband refused to let my 79-year-old father sleep in our empty guest room, I thought I was witnessing an act of selfishness. By breakfast the next morning, my husband had called me 43 times, not because he missed me, but because I had taken one folder from our safe. What I found inside that folder would expose nearly a year of lies, stop a secret loan against our home, and end with my husband facing the truth in front of every person he had deceived. Hello, everyone. My name is Linda Bennett. I was 53 years old, living in Westerville, Ohio, and I had been married to my husband, Gary, for 28 years. We had 2 grown children, a comfortable house, steady jobs, and the kind of marriage people described as solid. I believed that description too, until one ordinary Tuesday evening showed me how little I understood about the man beside me. Before I continue, I would truly love to know where you are listening from. What city, state, or country has this story reached? Please tell me in the comments below. It means a great deal to know how far my story has travelled. That Tuesday, Gary and I were eating takeout barbecue in our kitchen while the television played quietly in the next room. Nothing about the evening felt important. That is what I remember most. Life does not always warn you before it changes. My phone rang while I was wrapping the last piece of cornbread. The screen said, "Dad." "Hey, honey, are you busy?" "No, Dad." "What happened?" He gave a small, embarrassed laugh. Apparently, the upstairs bathroom has decided it no longer wants to be part of the house. A pipe had broken behind the wall of the little brick ranch in Worthington that he had shared with my mother. The restoration crew had removed drywall and part of the flooring. Several industrial fans were running in the hallway. The water had been shut off, and the contractor believed it would stay off until Friday. Then Dad became quiet. "Would it trouble you terribly if I stayed with you for 2 or 3 nights?" he asked. "Only until the water is back. I can bring my own towels." I laughed. "Dad, you do not need to bring towels. Of course you can stay here. I'll come get you." Dad hesitated. "Gary won't mind." Before I could answer, Gary spoke loudly enough for my father to hear. "Yes, I will." I stared at him. My father said nothing. "Dad, let me call you back in 5 minutes," I said. "All right, honey." When the call ended, Gary calmly took another bite of brisket. "What was that?" I asked. "Your father cannot stay here." For one hopeful second, I thought he was joking. Gary had an extremely dry sense of humour. Sometimes it took me several minutes to realise he had made a joke. There was no humour in his face. Why not? Because I do not want company. I looked toward the hallway. "We have a guest room. He needs it for 3 nights. Gary sighed as though I were forcing him to explain something obvious. "Linda, your dad wakes up before 6. He watches television too loudly. He leaves his medicine on the bathroom counter. And when contractors promise 3 days, it usually becomes 2 weeks. I work from home on Thursday." My father was 79, had no running water, and Gary's concern was a noisy workday. "He is my father," I said. "I know who he is. He helped us when you lost your job in 2009. He helped cover the mortgage. When the furnace failed in January and the children were sleeping upstairs in sweatshirts, he paid the repair bill." Gary's expression hardened. "Here we go. No, this is not about keeping score. It is about remembering who showed up for us. We repaid him." "That is not the point." "Then what is the point?" "Family." Gary pushed his empty container away. Walter helped us years ago. That does not give him automatic access to this house whenever he has a problem. Automatic access. He made my father sound like a stranger trying to enter a private club. He asked for 3 nights. And I said no. I waited, honestly believing he would hear himself and soften. Instead, he picked up his phone and said, "Absolutely not. Figure it out." Something inside me became very still. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I did not announce that our marriage was finished. I simply looked at the man I had loved for almost 3 decades and said, "Okay." Relief appeared on Gary's face. He thought I had surrendered. I picked up my purse and car keys. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To figure it out." Dad lived about 15 minutes away. When I arrived, the garage door was open. He was sitting on a folding chair beside one small suitcase and a grocery bag containing his medication and toiletries. He wore a clean blue shirt, neatly buttoned at the collar. That shirt nearly broke my heart. He looked as if he had dressed carefully to seem less burdensome. He stood when I stepped out of the car. "Listen," he said immediately. "If Gary does not want company, do not make this into a problem. There is a hotel near Polaris. I checked the price." "You checked?" "Of course." I did not want to assume. "You are not going to a hotel." He studied my face. "Did Gary change his mind?" "No." Dad's eyebrows rose. I took his suitcase before he could ask another question. "Then where are we going?" "Mum's condo." When my mother died, she left me a modest 2-bedroom condo in Dublin. Gary had encouraged me to sell it for years. I never did. Part of the reason was sentimental. Part of it was stubbornness. And perhaps some quiet instinct had told me not to give up the only property in my life that was unquestionably connected to me. The rarely used condo still held pieces of my mother's life. I made the spare bed for Dad and checked the water and heat. Then I told him I needed to return home for clothing. Gary was sitting on the couch when I came back. He looked at my empty hands. "Where is Walter?" "At the condo." He gave a short nod. "Fine." I walked upstairs and packed enough clothes for several days. Before leaving, I opened the small fireproof safe in our closet. Inside were passports, insurance records, and a thick folder labelled House. D-E'd, Loan, EQ-ID-Y. I did not know why I reached for it. Maybe I wanted proof that the house belonged to both of us. Maybe I wanted to understand what rights I still had in a home where my husband believed he alone could decide who entered. Whatever the reason, I put the folder in my bag. Gary appeared in the doorway. "Why are you taking that?" His voice made me stop. It was not simple curiosity. It was urgency. "I want to review the paperwork." "Leave it here. I need it tomorrow morning." "For what?" "Bank business." "What bank business?" "I will explain later." He reached for the folder, but I held it against my side. "If it involves our house, you can explain now." Gary stared at me. "You are seriously leaving over this?" "No. I am taking care of my father." "That is the same thing." I walked past him and left. That night, I lay awake asking whether I was really risking a 28-year marriage over 3 nights in a guest room. I did not yet know that the guest room was only the door. Gary's panic about the folder was the key. At 7:12 the next morning he called. I let it ring. 2 minutes later he called again. Then again. By the time Dad and I finished breakfast, Gary had called 43 times and sent 12 messages. "Call me?" "Linda, answer the phone. This is not funny. I have a 9 o'clock bank appointment. I need that house folder now." I read every message twice. Not one asked whether Dad had slept comfortably. Not one asked whether I was safe. Not one said he wanted me home. Dad poured himself more coffee. Everything all right? I looked at the screen. I do not know. For the first time, I wondered exactly what Gary needed from that folder. His first voicemail said only, "Linda, call me back." By the fifth, his tone had changed. "You are interfering with something you do not understand. I have an appointment this morning." Dad glanced at me. "Would you like me to become deaf for a few minutes so you can listen privately?" Despite myself, I smiled. "No, you are fine." Another voicemail arrived. "The appointment is at 9. I need the deed and refinance documents." "Bring them back now." I texted one question. "What is the appointment for?" His answer came instantly: home equity. "Bring the folder." Months earlier, Gary had casually mentioned that we should examine home equity rates. He described it as using the value of the house more efficiently. When I asked what we needed the money for, he said he was only exploring possibilities. Apparently, exploring had become a bank appointment. I typed, "Are you opening a home equity line of credit?" The 3 dots appeared, vanished, and appeared again. His only response was, "Call me." When I finally answered, he did not say hello. Finally, he said, "Bring the folder home." "Why are you borrowing against the house?" "I am not borrowing anything. I am discussing options." "Did I agree to those options?" "You do not need to approve a conversation with a banker." That was not my question. Silence. Then his voice became patient in the way it always did when he wanted me to feel unreasonable. "Nothing is being signed today. I need the documents so we can discuss possibilities." "What would the money be used for?" Another pause. "What business?" "I will explain when you come home." "Explain now." His voice hardened. "Stop interrogating me. Bring back the folder, and do not make this worse." Then he ended the call. That sentence stayed with me. Do not make this worse. Gary had a way of turning specific questions into evidence that I was difficult. By the 4th question, I would be defending my tone instead of receiving an answer. I looked across the table at Dad. He was carefully buttering a piece of toast and pretending he had heard nothing. "Did Mom keep copies of the papers from when you helped us buy the house?" I asked. His expression changed. "Your mother kept receipts for birthday candles. If a paper existed, she probably saved it. I may need to find it." Dad watched me for a moment. Then he said the kindest thing possible. "All right. No questions, no criticism of Gary, no attempt to direct me. Just permission to discover the truth for myself." That morning, I called Rachel Sloan, a Columbus attorney who handled property and family financial matters. A friend had recommended her years earlier. I explained the situation, including the folder and the unexplained bank appointment. "Bring every house document you have," Rachel said. "Also bring recent statements from any joint accounts you can legally access." That afternoon, I sat across from her in a quiet conference room near Henderson Road. Rachel was in her early 50s, with silver beginning at her temples and reading glasses resting low on her nose. She examined each page slowly. She did not gasp or make dramatic declarations, which helped me trust her. After 20 minutes, she looked up. "First, there is no magical document here that makes the house secretly yours and forces your husband to leave by dinner." I almost smiled. "Good. I would be suspicious if there were." She nodded. "Then we understand each other. The house was marital property, but the original purchase records mattered. When Gary and I bought it in 2001, my parents contributed 60, $2,000 toward the down payment. Dad had insisted that the money be documented. Part of it appeared traceable as a gift intended specifically for me. That does not decide everything, Rachel explained, but it is important. Then she opened the bank statements I had printed. Her finger stopped beside a transfer for $8,500. What is this? I do not know. Farther down was another transfer for $12,000, then $17,500, then smaller amounts, $5,000, $8,000, $4,000. My stomach tightened. Gary had told me he was moving cash into accounts with better returns. That sounded believable because Gary loved financial podcasts and interest rate comparisons. He could talk for 20 minutes about leaving money on the table. Rachel turned toward me. Do you know where these funds went? I thought I did. That is not quite the same thing. No, I admitted. It is not. For the first time, my anger gave way to fear, not panic, something colder. It was the feeling of walking through your own home and discovering a locked door you had never noticed. When I returned to the condo, Dad was watching an old Western. He muted the television. How large is it? He asked. How large is what? The thing you did not know about? I sat beside him. I am not sure yet. Maybe I am making it bigger than it is. Dad considered that. Then find out how big it really is. That night, I remembered Gary as he had been in 1998. Dad had pneumonia during an ice storm. My mother was afraid to drive, so Gary took groceries to their house, salted the walkway, and shoveled heavy snow from the driveway before going inside. He never complained. I had watched him through my mother's kitchen window and thought I chose a good man. That memory hurt more than the argument. A stranger's selfishness would have been easy to understand. Gary had once been generous. Somewhere in our long marriage, his fear and pride had begun taking up the space where kindness used to live. At 10:47 that night, he sent me a message. You have until tomorrow to come home and stop embarrassing me. Then another message appeared. Do not interfere with my business deal. I sat upright. Business deal. Until that moment, I had not known there was one. The next morning, I returned to Rachel's office with 3 years of tax returns and every joint account statement I could access. We followed the transfers one by one. When she added them together, the total was almost $90,000. That cannot be right, I whispered. Rachel turned the screen toward me. It is. For several terrible minutes, I imagined an affair and a second life. Rachel warned me not to run ahead of the evidence. The truth turned out to be stranger. The transfers led to a company called Foundry Social Holdings. Rachel found a promotional packet. The cover showed 2 men in golf shirts beside an indoor pickleball court, holding amber drinks and laughing. Beneath them were the words play, connect, belong. The planned business combined indoor pickleball courts, a restaurant, event space, corporate memberships, and private whiskey lockers. I stared at the brochure. It put $90,000 into pickleball. Rachel scrolled farther. Pickleball and bourbon. For 5 seconds, I laughed so hard that my eyes watered. Then I remembered the amount, and nothing was funny. Gary had not made one foolish transfer. He had sent money into the project for almost a year, slowly enough that I never saw the entire pattern. That meant he had hundreds of opportunities to tell me. He chose silence every time. I knew his business partner, Doug Keller. Doug always had a new opportunity, self-storage, craft spirits, a restaurant franchise, golf simulators. His projects were forever about to become enormous. Now, apparently, the future depended on Ohio residents paying premium fees to play pickleball near personalised whiskey lockers. Then Rachel found an email from Gary to Doug. Most of it was ordinary business language. One sentence changed everything. Linda does not really handle the investment side. She trusts me on that. I read it twice. The line did more than lie. It erased me. For 28 years, I had managed our taxes, insurance, tuition, medical bills, utilities, and mortgage. I had kept our family financially steady during Gary's unemployment. Yet, to his partners, I was the uninformed wife who simply trusted him. My phone rang. Gary, this time answered. "Tell me about Fundry Social," I said. The silence was immediate. "Who told you?" he finally asked. "The money did." "Linda, it is legitimate. Doug has worked on it for 2 years. The location is strong. Pickleball is growing. The money is not gone. It is invested. You used our joint savings without telling me. I told you I was moving money. You said you were putting cash into high-yield accounts. That was part of the plan." "No, Gary, that was a sentence you used because you knew it would stop me from asking questions." He became quiet. Then his voice softened. "I was trying to build something for us." For a moment, I heard the husband I remembered. Gary was 55. Younger men were being promoted around him. He had become increasingly worried about retirement and about spending another 15 years working for someone else. The club represented one last chance to own something meaningful. I understood the fear beneath his ambition, and that made the betrayal more painful, not less. "If this works," he continued, "we will not spend retirement worrying whether our savings are enough." "Then why did you hide it?" "Because you would have said no." The answer came too quickly. "So you knew I would not agree, and you decided my agreement was unnecessary. You are too conservative. You do not understand risk." There it was again. If I disagreed, the problem was not his deception. The problem was my supposed deficiency. "Did you tell Doug I supported borrowing against our house?" I asked. "Not exactly." "Did you let him believe it?" "He knows you generally support me." "I do not generally approve a secret loan against our home. You are making this sound worse than it is." I looked again at his email on Rachel's screen. "What time is your investor dinner on Thursday?" I asked. The line became silent. "How do you know about that?" I did not answer. "Linda, what are you planning?" Until that moment, I had not planned revenge. I did not want Gary's job or public humiliation. I was not even sure I wanted our marriage to end. I wanted something simpler, the truth spoken in the same room where his lie had been accepted. "I will see you Thursday," I said, and ended the call. Gary called our children next. Our daughter, Emily, phoned while I was sitting in the condo parking lot. "Mum, what is happening?" she asked. What did your father tell you?" "He said you left and took papers he needed for a business investment." "I left because Grandpa needed a place to sleep." "That is how it started." "Dade says you are trying to ruin the deal. The papers and the house belong to both of us." At 26, Emily still wanted to believe her parents could solve anything at the same kitchen table. "Whatever Dad did, do you really want to break the family apart over it?" The question cut deeply, even though I knew fear, not cruelty, was speaking. "I am not trying to break anything," I said. "Then go home and talk to him." "I have talked to him? Not like this?" I closed my eyes. "Emily, I love you. Your father loves you. Whatever happens between us will never change those things." I ended the call before she heard my voice break. Inside the store, I bought milk for Dad. At the register, I handed the cashier our joint credit card. Declined. She tried again. Declined. I used my personal debit card and walked to the parking lot. In the banking app, I saw that Gary had frozen the joint card. His text arrived seconds later. If you are going to live separately, you should start paying separately. I stood beside my car holding a gallon of milk. After 28 years of marriage, my husband had turned a credit card into a punishment. Rachel told me not to retaliate. I was not to empty accounts, freeze his cards, or change locks. I should document every action and protect myself legally. When I told Dad what had happened, he leaned back slowly. I should call him, he said. Absolutely not. This began because of me. No, Dad. You asking your daughter for a bed did not damage my marriage. I paused before adding the truth I had only just understood, turned on the light. Dad looked down at his hands. I never wanted you and Gary fighting on my account. He was not always like this. No, I said, I was not. That was the hardest part of a long marriage. When someone hurts you after 28 years, you are not angry with only one version of him. You are angry with the man standing before you while missing the younger man who taught your daughter to ride a bicycle, slept upright in a hospital chair when your son broke his arm, and made you laugh through family road trips. Anger did not erase those years. It had to live beside them. My son, Ryan, handled it differently. He asked only whether Grandpa had a safe place to sleep. When I said yes, Ryan replied, "Good, I love you." Those simple words made me cry again. Thursday arrived too quickly. The investor dinner was scheduled for 6:30 at a steakhouse near downtown Columbus. At 5:15, Gary emailed me, "If you embarrass me in front of my partners tonight, understand that our marriage may not recover." I sat in my car reading the sentence. For several minutes, I considered driving home. We could close the door, argue privately, and perhaps save enough pieces of our life to pretend nothing serious had happened. Then Dad walked out of the condo wearing his old navy blazer. The blazer from weddings, graduations, funerals, and my mother's memorial. He opened the passenger door. "Are you sure you want your old father coming?" "No," I said honestly. He nodded. "Good. That means you are thinking. You can still change your mind." I put on the blazer and hard shoes. At my age, that is a legal commitment. I laughed. I needed to. Dad and I arrived at the dark, elegant steakhouse at 6027. I sat in the parking garage staring at the clock until he quietly turned down the radio. Inside, a hostess led us toward a private dining room. I heard Gary before I saw him. He was using his warm business voice, the confident one that made strangers believe he had already solved every problem. There were about 11 people in the rooms. Doug Keller, a banker, 2 other investors, several spouses, and Gary. When he saw me, his smile vanished. When he saw Dad, fear crossed his face. He moved quickly toward us. "Linda, what are you doing here?" "I thought we should talk." "Not here." "Here is exactly where we need to talk." He looked at Dad. "Walter, no offense, but this has nothing to do with you." "None taken," Dad replied, which was clearly untrue. Gary guided me into the hallway and lowered his voice. "Please do not do this." The fear in his eyes was quieter now. For 1 second, I nearly softened. "Tell them yourself," I said. "Tell them what?" "That I never approved using our home." "Nothing has been finalized." "That was not my question." "You do not understand early stage financing." I almost smiled. "You should retire that sentence." He looked exhausted. "This is not a scam. I believe in this business." "I know you do." That surprised him. Then why are you trying to destroy it? Because believing in something does not give you the right to make my decisions for me. He looked back toward the private room. I thought we would finally have something of our own. Gary, we already had something of our own. We both knew I was not speaking only about the house. Doug appeared in the doorway. There you are. Linda, I am glad you came. Gary said you have been very patient with the process. I looked at my husband. His eyes dropped to the floor. Doug, may I ask you something? Gary said my name sharply, but I continued. Did Gary tell you I approved borrowing against our house? Doug's friendly expression changed. He said the two of you supported the financing plan. Gary stepped forward. That is not exactly what I said. Then tell them exactly what you said, I replied. Nobody spoke. The banker joined us. Her name was Susan Parker. She looked professional, calm, and understandably uncomfortable. I told her clearly that I had not agreed to a home equity loan for Foundry Social. Susan nodded. No loan can proceed without all required consent and documentation. Gary rubbed his forehead. Everybody needs to slow down. Linda is making it sound as though I stole money. I did not say that, I answered. I said you moved almost $90,000 from our joint savings into this company without telling me what it was. The room became completely quiet. Doug turned toward Gary. 90,000. Over time, Gary said. It is invested, not missing. I was trying to build a future. I believed him. That was what made the situation so maddening. Gary was not a cartoon villain. He was a frightened, proud man who had convinced himself that a good intention made permission optional. I know you wanted a better future, I said, but you cannot build our future by secretly spending our present. Gary's expression hardened. You have always been afraid of risk, and you decided that meant my vote did not count. I knew you would say no. Exactly. That single word stopped him. I took copies of the statements from my bag and handed them to Susan and Doug. Then I showed Doug the email claiming that I did not handle investments and simply trusted Gary. Doug read it and looked at my husband. You told me the home equity part was basically settled. Stay out of my marriage. Gary snapped. Doug handed the page back. You put your marriage into the financing plan. I did not demand that anyone punish Gary. I did not make a speech about revenge. I simply told Susan that I would not authorize borrowing against our home. The answer was no. Gary stared at me. Then his frustration finally broke through. You were doing all of this because I would not let your father stay in our house for 3 nights. Every face turned toward me. No, Gary, I said calmly. I am doing this because it took 3 nights for me to understand 28 years. Dad had remained silent. Now he stepped forward. Gary, when you lost your job, Joan and I helped with your mortgage. When the furnace failed, we helped again. We watched the children. We drove when you needed us. We did not do those things so you would owe us. Gary's face reddened. I never asked you to do them. Dad nodded. I know. That is usually how family works. Nobody moved. At that exact moment, a young waiter appeared holding several menus. He looked at the silent adults and seemed to realize he had entered at the worst possible time. Would anyone like to see the dessert menu? He asked. Dad raised one finger. Is the cheesecake financed through home equity? Doug laughed first. Then I did. Even Susan covered a smile. Gary did not laugh. He picked up his jacket and walked out. I watched him leave and expected to feel powerful. Instead, I felt as though someone had thrown 20 8 years of family photographs onto the floor and asked me to decide which memories were still real. The financing did not proceed that night. I did not destroy Gary's deal. I stopped protecting it from the truth. As Dad and I walked back to the parking garage, I understood that revenge did not feel like winning. It felt like refusing to continue losing quietly. Gary did not come home that night. Neither did I. For the first time in 28 years, we did not know where the other person was sleeping, and neither of us called to ask. Back at the condo, Dad removed his blazer and offered to make tea. My father had never voluntarily made tea in his life. "Do you want something stronger?" he asked. "Do you have something stronger?" "No." "Then why did you offer?" It sounded appropriate. After he went to bed, I sat alone at my mother's kitchen table. I miss Gary. That truth irritated me, but it remained true. I missed the man who left cabinet doors open, made coffee strong enough to remove paint, and complained about Ohio State football as though the coach called him for advice. You can love someone and still refuse what he has become. You can miss a marriage and still know it is no longer safe for your trust. The next day, Gary texted that he would stay at a hotel. I replied with one word, "Okay." Fundry Social did not collapse immediately. Real life rarely provides such convenient justice. Doug and the investors reviewed the numbers more carefully. Construction costs were higher than promised. Membership estimates were overly optimistic. The restaurant required additional capital. The projections depended on nearly every court remaining busy from morning until night. Doug withdrew. 2 other investors followed. By early fall, the project was finished. Gary lost a painful amount of money. I did not celebrate because some of that money had come from our life together. His financial failure was not my victory. My justice came from preventing him from risking our home as well. With Rachel's help, I protected my personal funds legally. Gary and I agreed to a formal separation without revenge games or secret withdrawals. I no longer wanted dramatic punishment. I wanted clarity. Gary stayed in a residential hotel for several weeks before renting a 1-bedroom apartment. Ryan observed the irony immediately. Gary had denied Grandpa 3 nights in a guest room and ended up living in a hotel himself. For the first time in days, we laughed. Emily needed more time. She hated the separation and wanted someone to repair it quickly. Eventually, I showed her enough financial records to understand what had happened without asking her to judge her father. She stared at the transfers for a long time. "I did not know," she said. "Neither did I." She apologized for pressuring me to go home. I told her she had been trying to save her family. For years, I had been doing the same. We had simply reached different definitions of saving. Dad's 3-day repair took 11 days, exactly as Gary had predicted. The workers discovered more moisture, then waited for a part. Each morning, Dad announced another delay, like a hotel guest afraid of missing checkout. On the 11th day, I drove him home. The house smelled like fresh paint and drywall. He carried his suitcase to the door, then turned around. "Sorry, I stayed longer than 3 nights. "Oh, do not test your luck," I said. He grinned and I hugged him. He held on longer than usual. "You did not have to do all of this for me?" he whispered. "Yes, I did. You spent my whole childhood teaching me that family shows up. You do not get to change the rule because you are 79. His eyes filled, so he immediately looked at the bathroom wall and changed the subject. "Do you think they matched that paint correctly?" Not even close. That was my father. 4 months later, Gary asked me to meet him at a Panera. I almost refused, but I went. He looked tired around the eyes. We discussed the children, insurance, and the house. Then we sat in silence. Finally, Gary wrapped both hands around his cup. "I have been trying to understand why I did it," he said. "The investment. All of it. I waited. I was afraid." That was not the answer I expected. He spoke about younger men receiving promotions, his fear that our retirement savings would not be enough, and the feeling that his life was becoming smaller. Fundry Social had seemed like one last large thing he could build. I understood his fear. I wished I did not, because understanding would have been easier if it automatically repaired trust. It did not. I convinced myself that because I meant well. "I did not have to ask you," he said. I was wrong. Then he stopped. There was no but. No explanation that I was overly cautious. No argument that the investment might have succeeded. Only I was wrong. After 28 years is when a man finally removes the excuse from an apology. I did not move home. I did not promise that I would. Forgiveness and reconciliation are two separate decisions, and neither must happen according to the person who caused the damage. Before I end, let me summarise what happened. My father asked for a safe place to sleep for 3 nights after a pipe broke in his home. Gary refused, even though my father had supported our family during its hardest years. When I left with the householder, Gary's 40, 3 calls exposed his secret plan to borrow against our home. That investigation revealed almost $90,000 taken from our joint savings and invested without my informed consent. At the investor dinner, I did not lie, threaten, or seek revenge. I told the truth, refused the loan, and allowed Gary's own choices to face their natural consequences. What did this story teach me? It taught me that a good intention does not replace permission. Love does not mean surrendering your voice. Family is not a debt ledger. Family is the decision to show up when doing so is inconvenient. It also taught me that one small act does not always destroy a relationship. Sometimes it simply turns on the light and reveals damage that has been growing in darkness. I still think about the quiet word I said in the kitchen that first night, okay? Gary thought it meant he had won. In truth, it was the moment I stopped arguing with what I could clearly see. Families can survive broken pipes, embarrassing dinners, failed investments, and painful truths. What they rarely survive unchanged is the moment convenience becomes more important than kindness, and control becomes more important than trust. If this story reminded you of someone who kept showing up for you when it was inconvenient, call them while you still can. And if an ordinary moment has ever changed the way you saw someone you loved, share your experience in the comments. Your story may help another person recognize what they have been explaining away. Thank you for watching. Please like and comment. And remember this, the night my father needed a bed, I did not lose my home. I finally found the courage to stop letting someone else decide what home was supposed to mean.